$70,000. That was the number staring back at me from the official HOA letter, typed in bold black ink like it was mocking me. My chest tightened. My mind went blank. 70,000 for what? For breathing the wrong way. For living in my own house? I held the paper with trembling fingers, my pulse hammering in my ears. Outside, kids were playing on the sidewalk. Sprinklers hissed across manicured lawns, and the sun burned golden across the neighborhood. Everything looked perfectly normal. But for me, the ground had just shifted. I called the HOA office immediately. After 3 redirects, I finally got the president himself on the line, Mr. Daniel Graham, a man whose voice carried the smugness of someone who believed the world bent to his will. "Mr. Cole," he said smoothly, "you've been fined according to the bylaws of our community. Multiple violations." "Violations?" I snapped. "What violations? I've done nothing wrong." "You've parked on the street during restricted hours. Your lawn exceeded the 2-inch regulation on several occasions. And you installed an unapproved mailbox design." I almost laughed in disbelief. "A mailbox?" He chuckled. "Rules are rules, Mr. Cole, and rules must be enforced. You have 30 days to pay the fine. Otherwise, legal action will follow." And just like that, he ended the call. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the phone pressed against my ear even after the line went dead. 30 days, $70,000. My heart pounded with rage. They thought they had me cornered. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that the ground they stood on wasn't theirs at all. It was mine. The story didn't begin with that letter. No, the seeds had been planted years before, long before the HOA was even formed. Back when I had first purchased my property, a narrow stretch of asphalt had been included in the deed. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Just an access road, the agent had said, but legally it was mine. And that one detail would become the weapon I never knew I'd need, but I didn't know that yet. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter spread open like a wound. Bills were already stacking up: mortgage, utilities, repairs. 70,000 was impossible. They wanted to break me, to make an example of me. The next morning, I walked into the HOA office in person. The place reeked of artificial lavender, with framed motivational quotes on the walls. Behind the counter sat Daniel Graham himself in a crisp suit and tie, his silver hair slicked back, his lips curled in that perpetual smirk. "Well, Mr. Cole," he said, leaning back in his chair, "have you come to settle your fine?" "I came to ask if you've lost your damn mind," I shot back. $70,000? Over a mailbox and a lawn? He shrugged. "It's all in the bylaws. You signed them when you moved in. If you didn't want to follow the rules, you shouldn't have chosen this community." "I'll fight this," I said. "You can try," he replied calmly, tapping his pen against the desk. "But I should warn you, HOA lawsuits are expensive. Most people lose. And even if you win, the legal costs will drain you dry. Sometimes it's better to just pay." The casual cruelty in his voice made my blood boil. He thought he had me trapped. But I just smiled tightly, leaned across his desk, and said, "You have no idea who you're messing with." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a promise." I walked out without another word. For the next week, I buried myself in old files. The original purchase contract, survey maps, property deeds. That's when I found it, the line item most people would skim past. Parcel includes easement access via community road, and beneath it, ownership of road parcel retained by buyer. My pulse quickened. I pulled out the official county records, cross-checked them, called the clerk's office to confirm. And when the clerk said, "Yes, sir, that road legally belongs to you," I nearly laughed out loud. The only road leading into the community. The one every single family, including Daniel Graham himself, used daily. It wasn't HOA property. It was mine. And suddenly, the $70,000 fine didn't feel like a noose around my neck. It felt like an opportunity. But I didn't act immediately. Timing mattered. I let the HOA stew, sending their nasty reminder letters, piling on late fees, escalating their threats. Each time I opened one of their envelopes, I smiled a little wider. They thought they were tightening the rope. In reality, they were wrapping it around their own necks. Finally, 2 weeks before their deadline, I sent out my own letters, official, notarized. stamped with county records attached, effective immediately. All residents are required to obtain a permit for use of the road owned by Mr. Jonathan Cole. Annual permit fee, $1,500 per household. Failure to obtain a permit will result in trespassing violations and restricted access. I made sure Daniel Graham got his copy first. The reaction was immediate. My phone exploded with calls. Neighbors banging on my door. Angry emails flooding my inbox. One man screamed in my face on the driveway, "You can't do this! That's our road." "No," I corrected calmly, holding up the deed. "It's my road." The whispers spread like wildfire. By the end of the week, the entire neighborhood knew the truth. Daniel Graham's smug smile vanished. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't the one cornered. Daniel called me himself. "Cole!" he barked, his voice stripped of its earlier calm. "You can't enforce this. The HOA owns this community." "The HOA owns nothing without access," I said. "And guess who owns access?" He was silent for a moment. Then, "This is extortion." "No, Daniel," I replied coldly. "This is business. Rules are rules." That night, sitting on my porch, I watched the endless stream of cars driving up and down my road. Every headlight beam reminded me they needed me more than I needed them. For years, I had been just another homeowner, pushed around by a board that thrived on control. Now the balance of power had shifted. And this was just the beginning. Because if Daniel Graham thought he could break me with fines, he was about to learn what it felt like to be broken himself. The first car to stop at my driveway that morning wasn't a neighbor's. It was Daniel Graham's black Lexus. He pulled up like a storm, the tires crunching hard against the gravel, his door slamming with the force of a man who believed volume was power. He marched up my porch steps without waiting for an invitation, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the wood. "Cole!" he barked, his face flushed. "What the hell is this?" He waved my letter in the air like it was a piece of filth contaminating his hand. I leaned back in my chair, coffee mug resting in my palm, and gave him the calmest smile I could muster. "That," I said, "is your new lease on life. Literally. Don't play games with me," he snapped. "You can't just decide one morning that the community road belongs to you. The HOA won't stand for this." "Decide?" I tilted my head. "Daniel, I didn't decide anything. The county records did. The deed did. Years before you ever thought about forming your little kingdom. That road is mine. Always has been." His jaw tightened, his face turning the same color as his tie, a deep, angry red. "You think you can intimidate me? You think you can hold this neighborhood hostage?" I leaned forward, setting my mug on the table with a deliberate clink. "I don't need to hold anyone hostage. They're free to leave whenever they want. But if they want to stay, they'll pay for the road that gets them here." For the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. His eyes flickered. Not with fear, but with the awareness that he wasn't in control anymore. "This isn't over," he muttered, stuffing the letter back into his briefcase. "You'll regret this, Cole, I promise you that." As he stomped back to his car, I couldn't help but smirk. He was right. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. By noon, the neighborhood was in chaos. Mothers on the sidewalks whispering, fathers in their driveways pacing with angry phones pressed to their ears. Kids played less freely, sensing the tension rippling through their parents. Some neighbors glared openly at me as I walked to my mailbox. Others avoided my eyes altogether. One man, tall and broad-shouldered, stormed up to me with his fists clenched. "You can't do this, Cole," he growled. "My wife and I saved our whole lives for this house. You're not going to bleed us dry with some ridiculous road fee." I kept my tone calm but firm. "I'm not the one bleeding anyone dry. Your HOA levied a $70,000 fine on me over grass and a mailbox. I'm just making sure things are fair." "Fair?" He spat the word like it was poison. "You're punishing all of us because of your beef with Daniel." I folded the deed in my hands and held it up. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm charging for what I own. If you don't like it, take another road. There is no other road," he snapped. "Exactly," I said quietly. His glare could have set me on fire, but he didn't argue further. He just stormed off, muttering curses under his breath. That evening, I got an official notice slid under my door. Not a letter from Daniel, No, this was bigger. Cease and desist. The HOA had hired lawyers. I read every word carefully, the legal jargon dancing in my head like static. They were accusing me of harassment, extortion, misuse of property rights. They claimed my permit system was invalid, that the HOA owned the easement rights, not me. For a brief moment, my stomach nodded. Was I wrong? Had I misread something? I spent the next 3 days buried in legal research, scouring county codes, state statutes, property law precedents. I barely ate. I barely slept. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. I was right. My ownership was airtight. The HOA had assumed the road was theirs simply because no one had ever challenged it. They'd built their empire on sand, and now the tide was rolling in. So I hired my own lawyer, a woman named Claire Donovan, sharp, relentless, with eyes like cold steel. After scanning the documents, she looked at me and said, "Mr. Cole, if they push this to court, you're going to win. And when you do, you're going to own their pride as well as their pocketbooks." I felt a weight lift off my chest. For the first time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was preparing to go on the offensive. The next HOA meeting was a war zone. The community hall was packed wall to wall with homeowners, voices raised, tempers flaring. Daniel sat at the front, gavel in hand, banging it against the desk for order. "This is outrageous," one woman shouted. "I have 3 kids in school. I can't afford an extra $1,500 a year." Another man yelled, "Why are we paying this guy at all? Daniel, fix it!" Daniel's face glistened with sweat, his composure cracking under the weight of their anger. Finally, he raised his hands. "Everyone, please. We are taking legal action. Mr. Cole's claims are fraudulent. He does not own the road." I stood in the back, letting them spew their venom, their accusations, their fear. Then, when the noise dipped, I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying through the hall, "I do." Every head turned. Daniel's eyes narrowed. I pulled a stack of documents from my briefcase and laid them on the front table. County records, survey maps, deeds, notarized, certified. This road has belonged to me since the day I bought my property. You've all been driving on it for years without knowing. I didn't mind, until the HOA tried to bury me in bogus fines. Now the terms have changed. The room buzzed with shock, disbelief, outrage. Someone shouted, "This is insane!" Another yelled, "He's lying!" But Claire, my lawyer, stepped up beside me, cool and composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am Attorney Donovan representing Mr. Cole. I can assure you everything he just said is 100% accurate. If you doubt it, I encourage you to check the county registrar's office yourselves. This is public record." The room fell silent. Daniel slammed his gavel. "You will not hijack this meeting!" I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I didn't hijack it, Daniel. You did, when you thought you could find me into submission. This is me taking back control." The meeting dissolved into chaos. Shouts, arguments, parents dragging kids out of the room. Daniel's face was pale now, his authority bleeding out of him like water through a cracked dam. And for the first time, I saw it. The look of a man who knew he'd underestimated his enemy. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from anticipation. I sat on my porch, watching the headlights of my neighbors' cars flash along my road. Every pair of wheels rolling across the asphalt was a reminder. They needed me, and I wasn't about to let them forget it, because Daniel Graham thought he had broken me with a $70,000 fine. But soon he was going to learn what it felt like to be broken himself. The courtroom smelled of old paper and dust, like history itself was watching. I sat at the defendant's table, my palms flat against the cool wood, my lawyer Claire beside me. Across the aisle, Daniel Graham sat in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my car. His smug smile was back, but I could see the cracks beneath it, the twitch in his jaw, the way his hands clenched too tightly around his pen. The judge entered, a stern woman with sharp eyes that didn't miss a thing. "This court is now in session," she announced. "The case? Graham versus Cole. The HOA versus me." Daniel's lawyer rose first, his tone oily and rehearsed. "Your Honor, the defendant is attempting to extort the homeowners of our community by charging unlawful fees for use of a common road. He claims ownership, but this is clearly a misinterpretation of property law. The road is, by easement and by implication, HOA property. His so-called permits are nothing more than blackmail. The words hung heavy in the air. Some neighbors sat in the audience whispering, glaring at me like I was the villain in their story. Then Claire stood, calm, precise, deadly. "Your Honor," she began, "what the plaintiff calls blackmail, the law calls ownership. We will present county records, signed deeds, and official surveys proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the defendant owns the parcel in question. For years, the HOA has operated under an assumption, but assumptions don't hold up in court. Records do." She placed a thick stack of documents on the judge's bench. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Daniel's lawyer scoffed. "We'll see about that." The battle that followed was brutal. Day after day, we were dragged into technicalities. Daniel's team argued about implied easements, about community interest, about the unreasonableness of my permit system. They painted me as a greedy loner, a man willing to destroy his neighbors' lives for profit. I sat there taking every word, my fists clenched under the table. But Claire was sharper. Every time they swung, she cut them down with precision. She held up certified maps, highlighted signatures, quoted statutes like a general commanding troops. At one point, the judge turned to Daniel's lawyer and said, "Counselor, unless you can disprove the deed, your argument holds no ground." Daniel's face darkened. Outside the courtroom, things weren't quieter. One night, as I walked to my car, I found my tires slashed. Another night, graffiti sprayed across my garage door. "Road thief." The neighbors were angry, desperate, manipulated by Daniel's poison. But every time I thought about backing down, I remembered that first letter. $70,000 for a mailbox and grass. $70,000 for daring to live. No, I wasn't backing down. The climax came on the 5th day of hearings. Daniel himself took the stand. He sat tall, his voice steady, dripping with righteous anger. "Your Honor, this man has terrorized our community. He's exploiting a technical loophole. He doesn't care about fairness or about his neighbors. He just wants to line his pockets at our expense. We must stop him before he destroys everything we've built." His words echoed, and for a moment I could feel the jury shift, the sympathy leaning toward him. He looked like a leader, a protector. He knew how to play the crowd. Then Claire called me up. I walked to the stand, my heartbeat pounding like a drum. She handed me the deed, the same paper I'd held in my kitchen weeks ago, and asked, "Mr. Cole, can you explain to the court what this document is?" I took a deep breath. "This is my property deed. It states clearly and without question that I own parcel 17B, the road leading into Maplewood Estates. And how long have you owned this parcel?" Claire asked. "Since the day I bought my home." 10 years, she turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this isn't a loophole. It's ownership. The HOA fined my client $70,000 for grass length and mailbox design. In retaliation, my client exercised his legal rights. This case isn't about greed. It's about abuse of power." I looked directly at Daniel, my voice steady. "All I ever wanted was to be left alone. But you couldn't let that happen, could you? You thought you could crush me. Well, now you know what happens when you push someone too far." The room went silent. The judge studied the documents for what felt like an eternity. Then she spoke. "This court finds that the defendant, Mr. Cole, is the rightful owner of parcel 17B. His right to enforce access fees is legally valid. The HOA's claim is hereby dismissed." Gasps erupted in the courtroom. Daniel shot to his feet, shouting, "This is insane! You can't let him—" "Sit down, Mr. Graham," the judge snapped, "or I'll hold you in contempt." I sat frozen, the words washing over me like fire and rain all at once. I had won. The aftermath was chaos. Neighbors shouted as they left the courthouse. Some cursed my name, others stayed silent, eyes downcast. But none of it mattered. The law was on my side. The road was mine. Daniel stormed out, his face pale, his lips pressed so tightly they turned white. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. Claire placed a hand on my shoulder. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You just took down an empire." But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet, because Daniel Graham wasn't finished. I could see it in the way he walked, stiff and angry. He had lost the battle, but the war was still raging, and I knew he would try everything to take me down again. But this time, I was ready. The night after the verdict, I heard footsteps outside my house. It was past midnight, the streets silent except for the hum of crickets. I peered through the blinds and saw a figure, tall, broad, moving with a limp I recognized instantly. Daniel Graham. He stood on the edge of my driveway, staring at my house like it had personally betrayed him. His fists were clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might storm up and pound on my door. But instead, he spat on the pavement, muttered something I couldn't hear, and disappeared into the dark. I should have felt afraid. Instead, I smiled. Because men like Daniel only came skulking in the night when they were already losing. The following weeks were war in slow motion. The HOA's machine had lost its fuel. The fines they threw around no longer had teeth. Neighbors realized that if they pushed me, I could close the road entirely. Some homeowners reluctantly paid the $1,500 fee. Others grumbled but complied. A few tried to resist, banding together to threaten boycotts, petitions, even protests. But the truth was simple. No road, no home. They needed me. Daniel, though. Daniel refused to accept defeat. He rallied his loyalists, whispering poison into their ears. Cole's destroying the community. He doesn't care about us. He's a parasite. His words spread, and soon some neighbors treated me like a leper. Cold stares, harsh words, a stone thrown through my front window one night. But for every enemy Daniel made for me, he made two for himself. Because while I was charging a flat $1,500, Daniel was still bleeding people with hidden HOA fees, fines, and threats. Slowly, quietly, people began to realize I wasn't the problem. He was. One evening, I was on my porch when a neighbor approached. Sarah, a single mother who lived 3 houses down. She looked nervous, wringing her hands. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, I wanted to thank you." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For standing up to him. For showing us that he's not untouchable. He fined me $500 last year because my son left his bike in the driveway overnight. I paid it because I was scared. But you—" She smiled faintly. "You fought back." Her words struck me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on my own battle, my own anger, that I hadn't realized how many others had suffered in silence. "Sarah," I said, "if you and others want to challenge him, you won't be alone. Not anymore." And just like that, the tide began to shift. Daniel's last stand came at the next HOA election. The community hall was packed again, just like before. But the energy was different this time. People weren't shouting at me, they were shouting at him. "You've abused your power long enough, Daniel," one man roared. "We're sick of your fines, your threats, your games." Another yelled. Daniel slammed his gavel desperately. "Order, order!" His voice cracked. When it came time for the vote, the result was brutal. Out of 30 households, 24 voted to remove him as president. The rest abstained. Not one voted in his favor. The gavel slipped from his hand. His face went ghost white. For the first time, the king had no throne. I watched from the back of the room as he stumbled, muttered curses, and stormed out. His reign shattered. After that, things changed fast. The new board was quieter, humbler, careful not to overreach. They approached me cautiously, asking if I'd consider reducing the road fee now that Daniel was gone. I looked at them, thought for a long moment, and finally said, "Half, $750 per household." The relief on their faces was almost comical. They agreed instantly. It wasn't about the money anymore. It never had been. It was about balance, about proving that power cuts both ways. As for Daniel, rumors swirled. He sold his house within a month, moving out under the cover of night. Some said he faced lawsuits of his own for financial misconduct within the HOA. Others claimed he left town altogether. Too humiliated to show his face, I never saw him again, but sometimes, late at night, I'd stand at the edge of the road, my road, and imagine him driving away for the last time, forced to pay the toll to the man he tried to destroy. Now, when I walk through the neighborhood, the stares are different. Some people still resent me. Others nod with quiet respect. And a few, like Sarah, smile and wave, knowing what I did wasn't just for me, but for all of them. The road is still mine. The power is still mine. But I don't need to wield it like a weapon anymore. Just knowing it's there, that's enough. because I learned something through all this. Sometimes, the smallest detail, the overlooked line in a deed, the forgotten scrap of paper, can change everything. They fined me $70,000 to break me, but they forgot one thing. The only way into their kingdom was through my gate, and I'll never let them forget it.